The fire was hot enough to kill anything that entered it. The aliens knew that. So when the humans walked in anyway, they assumed only one thing: immunity. In low orbit above Earth, the Jarlek vessel Observer's halo drifted silently against a backdrop of stars. Inside its command chamber, thermal readouts flared crimson across holographic screens, accompanied by scrolling glyphs blinking warnings in quiet urgency. The surface blaze stretched across 4 industrial sectors: molten steelworks, polyfiber production, 2 freight depots, and it had erupted with a ferocity that stunned even the long-sighted Jarlek science team. Surface temperature, 1100 Kelvin, muttered researcher Veek, his tendrils stiff with tension. Organic matter within that radius cannot survive. Another Jarlek, Counselor Hareth, swept one-eye lens across the map. Containment drones are idle. Signal blockage in Sector Delta. Human emergency crews en route. ETA 67 seconds, Veek confirmed. We should mark the site unviable. Down on Earth, sirens cut through the oily haze as red fire engines wove through automated traffic, their hulls scorched from proximity to heat blooms even before arrival. Towering above them, a steel refinery groaned as support beams sagged inward, half-eaten by flame. Thick smoke rolled out from its upper floors, glass bursting in rhythmic pops. The air shimmered like a living thing. Captain Lin Tran stepped out of her truck into the rising ash. She didn't flinch, didn't pause. She just looked. A calm survey, no panic, no wasted movement. Her gear was already on yellow turnout coat, sealed rebreather, helmet snugged tight. Her boots struck wet pavement as she walked across the fire line, taking readings from her wrist HUD with practiced ease. Behind her, Engine 9 and Rescue 12 rolled to a stop. The crews poured out fast but controlled, every firefighter checking each other's gear with silent nods and gloved hand gestures. In orbit, Veek watched in disbelief. They are not wearing thermal shielding, he hissed. No environmental suits, no exoskeletons. Look at their posture, Hreth added, voice soft. No urgency. This is a cultural ritual. They walk into the flames without resistance. Veek tapped his command panel, overlaying the human forms with heat contours. The sensors spat back values that were biologically impossible. They're in full exposure. The one leading captain designation, Lin Tran, she just crossed into open blaze. It must be a genetic trait. There is no other explanation. In reality, Lin was counting. 3 seconds at the threshold to watch how the fire breathed, how the building exhaled its heat. Then in. Her team followed, one behind the other, into the mouth of the inferno. Inside, visibility dropped instantly. Searing light mixed with choking blackness, punctuated by the howl of warped metal and the hiss of stressed pipes. She heard Calvo's voice in her earpiece. 2 o'clock walls flexing. Upper deck might come down. Copy, Lin replied. Her voice was even, untouched by the heat pressing against them from all sides. Stay low. Watch that ceiling. Squad 2, go vertical through the service shaft. Vent and advance. Alien sensors picked up their every move. They separated, Veek noted. No panic. They split their formation while inside a lethal environment. They know the structure's failing, said Hreth. They still divide. Why? Because we're not here to watch things burn, Lin muttered inside her mask as she reached the control substation. She toggled the main breaker, nothing. Backup systems had already melted. She tapped her HUD again. Secondary circuits are gone. We're working blind. Calvo, run the thermal scanner sweep for bodies. Live heat signatures. Copy. I've got 2 in Sector Gamma, probably huddled near the coolant ducting. Weak signals. On it. They moved deeper. The heat was not just ambient, it pushed. A wall of pressure that pulsed with living rhythm. Fire, taking breath and exhaling destruction. Every movement was pain waiting to happen, but Lin's steps were precise. She avoided hotspots by habit, tested footing by feel, trusted the language of collapse, how flame hinted just before steel gave way, how the silence before a groan meant run. Back in orbit, Veek's feed glitched. Thermal image lost. Did they perish? No, Hreth whispered. They passed through it. And they had. Lin led her squad through a shattered corridor, barely held aloft by twisted girders, where every step was calculated. She pulled a man out from beneath a half-melted pipe, shouted to Maya to take the woman still conscious. She paused only long enough to get them breathing masks, then checked her team's air supply. Calvo, you're redlining. I can go. No, you're out in 3. Maya, rotate in. Behind them, a groan of metal turned to a roar. A support beam, compromised and burning from within, sheared loose from the ceiling. Lynn shoved Maya forward, grabbing Calvo's harness, and threw both of them ahead just before the floor gave out beneath her. On the orbital station, alien monitors spiked with alarm. The seismic sensor marked a partial collapse. Heat blooms surged. Life signs winked out for 2.7 seconds. Then, slowly, one by one, they returned. She lived, Veek said, stunned. She adapted, Hreath corrected. Rerouted. There, re-entering, through the maintenance port. Lynn had fallen into a service corridor, half full of steam and debris. Her mask cracked but held. Her wrist alarm shrieked until she silenced it. Her ribs hurt. Nothing broken. She cursed under her breath, pushed herself up, and limped forward into the dark. Outside, Calvo tried to argue. We need to go back for her. Maya already had a line out, swinging it around a broken vent. She's not gone. She's ahead of us. Lynn's voice buzzed back through the comm. Secondary ingress clear. Moving to target location. Regroup in 2. She didn't mention the pain. Didn't need to. The job wasn't done. Another corridor, another search. The woman they found this time had lungs full of smoke. Lynn took her weight without flinching, muscles screaming under the heat. She couldn't sweat. There was nothing left to cool her down. Just forward. One step, then another. Alien observers stared. They don't respond like any species we've cataloged, Veek muttered. No shielding, no genetic resistance. Yet they endure. Not immune, Reth said slowly. They're trained. Conditioned. Every breath, every move, calculated. Fire is not survivable. But they survive it anyway. By the time the last civilian was out, Lynn's suit had scorched in 3 places. Her gloves were blackened. Her oxygen was below minimum safe levels. She didn't mention it. The team emerged from the building with soot-streaked faces, carrying unconscious survivors, arms shaking with effort. Lynn's helmet came off last. Her face was pale, drenched in sweat, hair plastered to her skull. She didn't collapse, but she did sit, for just a moment, breathing in air that didn't burn. Rescue 12's medic crouched beside her. Ribs? Bruised, maybe cracked, she said. Stable. He scanned her with a handheld. Yeah, you're riding the edge, Cap. Always. The flames were mostly out now. Suppression foam hissed from mounted units. Ventilation had cleared the worst of the smoke. What was left was steam, silence, and the low clank of exhausted gear being packed away. Up in orbit, the Jarlek data recorders finished compiling. The entry read, Initial conclusion, incorrect. Humans do not possess fire immunity. Incident survivability was enabled by advanced environmental response protocols, high-risk decision patterns, and conditioned behavior bordering on self-sacrifice. Recommended update, Cultural Resilience Doctrine. Hreath watched Lynn Tran disappear back into her truck. She had already logged the event, already setting coordinates for the next call. They treat this as routine, Veek whispered. No, Hreath replied. They treat it as necessary. And then he, too, updated the model. The smoke hadn't even settled by the time the first alien delegation requested access to Earth emergency response data. Jarlek Command, back in their home sector, had seen the incident log from Observer's Halo and responded with rare urgency. The event was tagged under immediate cross-cultural anomaly, and Hreath, now acting as liaison, was tasked with answering one pressing question. If humans were not immune to fire, how had they done what they did? On Earth, the answer was more mundane. The scorched vehicles of Rescue 12 had barely returned to their station outside Greater Cincinnati before the debrief began. Captain Lynn Tran sat in the corner of the main bay, sipping from a metal bottle that no longer had any heat left in it. Her ribs were wrapped. She didn't complain. Across from her, Calvo was shirtless, a bag of ice balanced on his neck, and Maya was writing her report with the same careful hand she used for everything. Their gear was still airing out, smelling like melted plastic and grit. The building's overhead fans pushed the heat around, doing little. I'm going to say it again, Calvo said, lifting his head. That collapse was too damn close. You hesitated, Lynn replied without malice. He blinked. What? You hesitated when you heard the beam. Just for a second. He frowned. It didn't sound... I know. It didn't sound like it was that close. But your ears lie in a fire. There was no anger in her voice. Just information. You lived, she added. That means you learn. Outside the debrief room, two Zarleks stood motionless behind the glass wall. They had come in an official diplomatic vessel, first contact rules observed, with translation equipment already calibrated. One of them was Vik, the data researcher from orbit. The other was a new figure, Envoy Tilhet, tall and sleek with soft bioluminescence running across his head crest. They didn't speak. They simply observed the humans through the glass. Is this correction typical? Tilhet asked at last, his translator weaving the words with a calm, synthetic lilt. Which correction? Reth replied, standing beside them in a less formal posture. This report. Tilhet gestured toward the human footage still replaying behind him. They logged a full building collapse. Structural integrity exceeded all projections. And yet, there were no fatalities. Is that standard? By human records, no, Hreath replied. Statistically, there should have been at least 3 crew injuries or worse, but their system accounts for the chaos. They allow for it. They rehearse it. Look. They watched as Lynn lifted a data slate from the table and tapped through real-time reconstructions of the fire scene. The layout appeared in hollow above her wrist. She'd mapped the entire collapse zone based only on vibration and heat readings from memory. She's not just recalling what happened, Hreath said. She's adjusting the plan for next time. The Zarlek envoy remained silent for a long moment. Then he said, "We need to understand this species. We've misread them." 2 days later, the alien delegation arrived at Station 89. It wasn't designed for visitors, especially not tall bipedal researchers with shimmering skin and multiple vertical eyelids. The ceiling was too low, the lighting too warm, and the break room still smelled faintly of chili and engine grease. But the firefighters didn't change anything. Lynn insisted that the aliens come to them, not the other way around. "This isn't a demo," she said. "We're not staging a performance. If they want to learn how we operate, they'll watch the real thing." Maya added, "Also, we don't have time to put on a show." The aliens arrived without fanfare, escorted by 2 UN cultural liaisons, who had obviously been briefed on how not to react to grease stains and half-melted boots. Tilhet, Vikik, and a quiet third member named Rohet stood beside the main engine, studying the gear with fascination. Lynn nodded in greeting but didn't shake hands. "You wanted to see the tools," she said simply. "There they are." Tilhet stared at the gear lockers. "This is the armor you wore?" he asked. "It's not armor," Lynn corrected. "It's turnout gear. Flame-resistant, not flame-proof." "Then how did it survive internal temperatures of..." He paused, scanning a data node. 1,000 Kelvin? "It didn't," Calvo said from the bench, holding up his gloves. "These are trashed. 2 layers gone. I've got a few burns. Not bad, but definitely not immune." Rohet approached slowly, peering at the heavy jacket hung on the drying rack. His voice was faint through the translator. "So, you use disposable defense layers?" Maya shook her head. "No, reusable, but with limits. The protection degrades. That's why we check everything before and after every call. Our job isn't to beat fire, it's to manage the risk." Lynn stepped forward, picking up her helmet. "You think we walked into fire like we can't be hurt? That's your mistake. We know exactly how much danger we're in. That's why we make it out." Tilhet tilted his head. But why enter at all? There it was, the question they hadn't asked yet. "Because people were in there," Lynn said. "Because we have a window minutes, sometimes less before heat or gas or collapse kills them. You don't waste time wondering if it's safe. You do the math. Gear check, structure check, time estimate, then go." Vik stared at her. "But the data models say, your chances of survival..." She cut him off. "I don't care what the model says. We go anyway, because if we don't, they die. That's the calculation." No one spoke for a moment. Then Rohet looked at his slate. "May we observe a live call?" "You can observe," Lynn said. "But you stay out of the way. The job doesn't slow down for visitors." The call came that night. Chemical fire. Freight zone. Mid-level containment breach. Explosions possible. Station 89 was in motion within seconds. Lynn was first in the truck. Boots slammed into metal flooring, belts clicked, visors dropped. Calvo and Maya followed. Quiet now. No chatter. Just focus. The aliens rode in a separate emergency vehicle, fitted with thermal shielding. They watched the convoy cut through city streets, lights strobing red and white, sirens winding like hunting cries into the dark. At the scene, the building burned with a deep orange glow. That was wrong. This wasn't wood or plastic. Something in the shipment was feeding the fire, a chemical mix that burned dirty and high. Lynn scanned the perimeter as her boots hit pavement. Structure is a single-floor warehouse, venting through north side. Engine 9. Get water on that west corner. Rescue team with me. Gas monitors on. Inside the main structure, the fire danced in slow, greasy spirals. Something hissed as it vaporized. A ceiling panel dropped behind them with a wet smack. Alien observers watched from their sealed vehicle, feeds live and data streaming. They saw human vitals spike, heart rate, adrenaline, internal temperature. The breathing rates weren't calm anymore, but still controlled. They're hurting, Tilhet said softly. Yes, Reith confirmed from the comm channel, but they know where the line is, and they know how to walk it. Inside the building, Lynn's voice cracked through the smoke. Collapse in 20 seconds. Back out now. Go. Calvo hauled Maya back as a shelf unit toppled. Flames curled around the steel like it was paper. Sparks hit Lynn's face shield and scattered. Outside, the aliens expected retreat. They expected the humans to regroup, wait for suppression teams. But Lynn didn't stop. She adjusted her mask, pointed toward a utility corridor, and said, "We go back through the west access. There's a wall vent might lead to the rear loading bay. Reports said 3 workers made it to a back room. If that vent held, it's our way in." Calvo nodded without hesitation. Maya checked her air. They went. The aliens watched humans disappear back into flame. Veek's translator muttered, "Statistical logic is breaking." Rohet leaned closer to the feed. "No, it's not logic. It's something else." Minutes passed. The data feeds trembled under heat distortion. Then, suddenly motion. 3 humans emerged from the smoke. 2 were dragging someone. The third was covering them with a fire blanket, limping. The loading bay had buckled, but the access vent had held. Lynn had known it would. Back at Station 89, hours later, the aliens sat in stunned silence. Tilhet finally spoke. "You weren't immune. You're just prepared for pain." Lynn, her ribs taped tighter this time, gave a tired smile. "Pain's not the enemy. It's just feedback." Veek opened his data slate one more time, deleted the word immunity, and replaced it with a phrase he'd never expected to write: cultural resilience doctrine. Species-level response behavior involving extreme hazard tolerance, structured risk adaptation, and self-sacrificial rescue behavior conditioned through repeated generational exposure. And under that, he added one more note: do not mistake discipline for biology. Lynn Tran didn't see the entry. She was already checking her gear for the next call. The report made its rounds through the Jarlik Confederacy faster than most political decrees. Translated into 4 dialects, encoded for planetary distribution, and flagged with an unprecedented advisory for biological behavior reassessment, the amended entry caused unease across more than a dozen systems. Humans were not immune to fire. They were simply willing to face it anyway. It was not a comforting thought. On most developed worlds, hazard protocol was centered around avoidance, containment, or drone mitigation. Species with tactile sensitivity thresholds far above humans rarely entered high-temperature zones directly. Rescue operations were managed by proxy automated systems or sacrificial synthetics. There was no cultural equivalent for what the humans called interior entry. So when the Jarlik Council called for an interspecies emergency protocol summit, the humans sent their best to explain what couldn't be modeled on paper. Captain Lynn Tran did not want to go. "This is diplomacy," she said flatly, watching her gear being packed into climate-sealed crates. "I run into burning buildings. I don't attend roundtables." Maya, always the patient one, gave her a look. "They've asked specifically for you, multiple times." "I'm not going to give a lecture. I don't do speeches." "You don't have to. Just show them what we do." Calvo leaned in from the doorway, sipping a protein shake. "You did say last week the only way they'd understand is if they saw it with their own eyes." "I meant on site, not in a hall with filtered air and wine fountains." "You think Jarlek drink wine?" Maya asked. "I don't care what they drink. I care that while we're standing on some sterile platform explaining protocols, somebody's warehouse might be turning into a crematorium back home. The station commander intervened before Lin could dig in further. They're calling this an interspecies hazard logic gap. If we don't explain how we operate, they'll keep misreading our actions. Or worse, try to mimic them without understanding the risk. That could get people killed. Lin looked away. She wasn't afraid of the fire. But she wasn't used to being the reason people listened, either. 3 days later, she stood beneath the high ceilings of Jarlek Unity Hall on the orbital station Jel Harun, dressed not in dress uniform, but in her turnout gear. The room was quiet. Rows of alien representatives sat on curved platforms overlooking the central floor. Some were tall and serpentine, others compact and squat, glittering under the light. Many lacked mouths. All had eyes, and all of them were fixed on her. Tilhet stood at her side, acting as interpreter and moderator. Behind them, a holographic projection played the composite footage from the industrial fire on Earth. Lin's team was visible in thermal silhouette, advancing, retreating, breaking through flame lines. It was wordless, the sound muted. But the visuals were enough. Finally, Tilhet spoke. Honored delegates, the human before you is not genetically enhanced. She is not fire-resistant. She is not immune. A murmur passed through the room. Lin stepped forward. Her voice carried, even without amplification. I've seen your reports. I've read the phrases you use. Tactical impossibility. Biological contradiction. I get it. What we do doesn't make sense to you, but that's only because you're looking at it like we're built different. She took off her helmet, holding it under one arm. We're not. We burn. We suffocate. We die, same as anyone. But we've spent generations teaching ourselves how not to. A larger alien, thick with layered skin like cooled magma, raised a translator node. But why? What is gained by tolerating pain and risk when safer alternatives exist? Lin nodded slowly. We don't always have safer options. Our environments aren't always stable. We evolved with wind, fire, earthquakes, floods. We didn't get to design around them. We had to survive them. And that meant stepping into danger when there was no one else to help. Another delegate, this one translucent and aquatic, gestured with a bioluminescent fin. But your people send organics into structures that are mathematically unsound. That is madness. No, Lin said. It's preparation. I know the math. I study the math. But I also know that sometimes the window is closing, and every second you wait to make it perfect is a second someone inside doesn't have. She stepped aside, tapping the hollow controls. The feed shifted to helmet cam footage. Her own perspective now, showing the moment the corridor collapsed. Her fall. The scramble. The rising heat. This wasn't luck. I knew that corridor had a chance of going. But I also knew the substructure was probably hollow a service run. It gave me a way out. I planned for that. I wasn't being reckless. I was being ready. A murmur moved through the observers again. This time, more thoughtful. Tilhet translated for those who lacked auditory hearing. The phrase he used was one that rarely appeared in Jarlek documentation. Anticipatory resilience. It didn't have a direct equivalent in their lexicon. After the summit, Lin was invited to a demonstration site, one of several new hazard training environments being constructed by the Confederacy. This one was simulated fire. Safe, controlled. It felt fake. The flames were too symmetrical. The heat distribution was modeled, not chaotic. There was no smoke, just filtered vapor. And yet, the Zarlik training officers were watching with great interest as Lin examined the setup. One of them approached her with cautious enthusiasm. We have constructed a scenario matching your last deployment. We wish to simulate the civilian rescue with drone observers. Lin squinted at the setup. Your floor grid is stable. Yes, of course. The scenario must be repeatable. She pointed at a beam overhead. You're missing fatigue points. That wouldn't hold under real heat. That would violate the safety parameters. And your smoke simulation doesn't replicate zero visibility. That would make navigation unviable for trainees. Exactly. The Zarlak paused. Then, how do you train for chaos? Lin looked at him, her expression unreadable. By accepting that it's coming, we don't eliminate uncertainty. We get familiar with it. She walked through the simulation space, pointing out inconsistencies not to shame, but to instruct. Your victims are static. In a real fire, they panic. They move. They make the wrong decisions. You have to plan for that. Your vent paths are too clean. Smoke doesn't cooperate. Your soundscape is missing structural groans. Humans listen for that. Till had observed from a distance. He had seen this before, this mindset that looked at failure not as catastrophe, but as feedback. This wasn't immunity. This was intimacy with disaster. Lynn had lived in environments that betrayed their structures without warning. She didn't fear collapse. She anticipated it. She didn't avoid failure. She rehearsed it until it became a path forward. That was the secret. Later, aboard the ship preparing to return her home, Tillhet visited Lynn one last time. He brought a data slate, but this time it was not a questionnaire. It was a model update. She looked it over without speaking. There were new terms in the header. Human Fire Resilience Model V3. 7. Hazard Internalization Doctrine. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a religion. Tillhet gave something resembling a smile. It may be, to some, to you, perhaps it is routine. But to us, it is revelatory. She handed the slate back. We're not trying to impress anyone. We just do the job. I know. That's what makes it more difficult to quantify. He paused. I reviewed hundreds of hours of your kind's rescue footage. Firefighting, flood mitigation, earthquake response. In almost every case, there was one thing your species did that others would not. What's that? You entered before certainty was established. Lynn shrugged. If you wait for certainty, people die. Yes, he said quietly. That is what we are struggling to understand. We are a species of certainty, but you have built a system on managing the lack of it. She looked out the viewport. Earth was visible below blue, scarred, glowing faintly. We don't get to wait, she said. So, we train, we plan, and then we move, even if it hurts. Tillhet stood in silence, absorbing the weight of that truth. He finally said, We would like to send our own into your training programs. Lynn didn't hesitate. You're welcome to try, but make sure they understand it's not about bravery. It's about discipline. The fire doesn't care who you are. He nodded. As the ship descended toward the planet, passing into atmosphere, the last transmission from the orbital station marked the update of over 2,000 policy frameworks in the Confederacy's emergency response network. No longer were humans categorized as anomalously heat-resistant. They were now designated as an adaptive, high-risk species with operational extremity tolerance. But Lynn Tran never read the final report. She was already back in her boots, walking into another engine bay, as the tones rang out for a structure fire just east of the old freight line. And she didn't hesitate. The house was small, old, and already mostly consumed by the time Lynn arrived. Peeling paint blistered on the siding. A garden hose coiled limply in the yard, melted halfway across the driveway. Black smoke funneled out of every visible seam in the roof. The front door had burned clean off its hinges, leaving a jagged entry. Inside, heat pulsed in waves that blurred the air. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalks, eyes wide, mouths covered. Sirens still echoed behind Lynn, as Engine 9 screamed into position and brake-locked beside her. She didn't wait for updates. A child was missing. The dispatcher had relayed the mother's voice over the call, screaming, desperate, incoherent, words half swallowed by grief. But Lynn had caught the essential fragment. 6 years old, last seen near the back hallway. No exit, no sign of escape, which meant the child was still inside. Calvo swung out of the truck before it had fully stopped. Maya was already pulling her mask on. Smoke swirled between them like a living thing, oily and impatient. Lynn clipped her helmet down and checked her air. 2-minute push, she said, voice sharp through the radio. Calvo with me. Maya on line support. We locate, we extract. Structures failing, fast stay mobile. The roof groaned as if to confirm it. Alien eyes weren't watching this time. No researchers floated overhead. No diplomats waited for explanations. There was no press feed, no summary report, no summit, no advisors. Just the fire, the team, and the seconds falling away like burning paper. They moved in. The entry corridor had already lost its ceiling and parts. Chunks of plaster and beam material littered the floor. Every step kicked up clouds of soot. Lynn stayed low, flashlight sweeping in rapid arcs. Her gloved hand touched the wall, not for support, but to gauge temperature. The heat was climbing toward the threshold where protective gear began to fail. Rear hallways blocked, Calvo called. Flames across the width. Vents are pushing heat toward the middle. Copy. Shift right. Closet might feed through. Use it. Lynn ducked under a fallen beam. Her oxygen tank scraped something metal. A cabinet door burst open as if blown by breath. Her pulse was steady, but her muscles screamed from the ambient heat. The hallway twisted, narrowed, then expanded into a rear bedroom lit in deep, flickering orange. She saw a small form beneath the window. Lynn didn't wait. She crossed the floor in 4 long strides, kneeling beside the child. The boy was unconscious, face soot-streaked, chest moving shallowly. No burns, but time was thin. She pulled the rescue hood from her belt and secured it over his head, sealing it with practiced speed. Her air monitor warned her she had 78 seconds of supply. Calvo's voice came over the radio. "Vents closing, we have to go. Now." "Got him," Lynn said. She turned, the boy tucked against her chest, and started back. Half the ceiling dropped. Not all of it, just enough to cut the hallway off. A wall of flame replaced the doorway she'd entered through. Her path back was gone. For a heartbeat, everything was sound. The roar, the crash, the panic trying to claw its way into her skull. Then she moved again. "West wall," she snapped. "May have an exterior drop." She didn't ask for permission, didn't check schematics. There was no time for consultation. Her HUD pinged with collapsing temperature stability. Her legs felt like they were wading through boiling syrup. But the boy's chest still rose and fell. That was enough. She slammed her shoulder into the wall. Wood cracked. The frame gave an inch. "Captain," Calvo's voice, now, desperate. "Still mobile," she answered. Another hit. This time, the wall buckled. She braced the boy behind her and kicked upward with both feet, blowing through the panel like a battering ram. Smoke poured out with her. She tumbled onto the gravel below, lungs pulling air that wasn't much cleaner but didn't burn. Hands grabbed her. Maya, Calvo, someone else. The child was taken. Oxygen was pulled over her face. Water poured onto her arms. And then the world slowed again. The child was coughing. Alive. Lynn tried to sit up. "Don't even think about it," Calvo said, kneeling beside her. "My gear," she rasped. "Forget the gear. You're lucky your mask didn't melt." Medics descended. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. She just walked through open flame, her suit's half gone. "No," Lynn murmured. "I walked through it because there was no one else who could." 2 weeks passed. Lynn spent 5 of those days in the burn ward. Not because she asked to, but because her injuries required it. Deep thermal trauma along her left arm and side. Minor inhalation damage, 2 cracked ribs, the kind of injuries that didn't earn medals. They earned skin grafts and mandatory rehab. Maya visited on day 3. She brought no flowers, just gear inspection reports. 2 helmets failed quality checks. One of them was yours. Lynn smirked with the side of her face that didn't hurt. "I told them that one had bad seals." Calvo came on day 5. He brought a tablet full of messages from schools, stations, even a few foreign governments. "You've got 50 invites to speak. Pass. Some of them want to name training programs after you." "No." He shrugged. One of them offered a cat. Lynn blinked. "A cat?" Apparently in their culture, cats are heroes. She almost laughed. It came out as a cough. Outside the window, Earth spun in silence. Storm systems drifted over oceans. Sunlight bounced off the edge of continents. She looked at it and thought not of glory, or legend, or reputation. She thought of the boy breathing. The Jarlek Confederacy updated their models again. They added new language after reviewing the fire footage from the small house. The terms were blunt. Human risk thresholds exceed predictive algorithms under conditions involving non-kin altruism. Emotional override triggers action despite environmental lethality. Response model no longer based on survival logic, but on a cultural imperative to intervene. They labeled it volitional hazard transcendence. In simpler words, humans do it anyway. They also released a training guide titled Adaptive Emergency Entry, a human-centric framework. It included excerpts from Captain Lynn Tran's debriefs. It did not list her injuries. It did not describe her as a legend. It simply showed her walking into flame. Again, and again, and again. A month later, Lynn returned to work. She walked through the bay doors with a new helmet under her arm and bandages still hidden under her coat. Nobody clapped. Nobody gave a speech. That wasn't how they did it. Maya handed her a new oxygen tank. Calvo tightened the straps on her coat. The engine tones went off. Structure fire. Northeast residential. 2 trapped. Possible pets. Lynn stepped into the truck like she'd never left. "All right," she said. "Gear up. We're going in clean. Eyes forward. Stay on the line. No one gets left behind." The city passed in flickers of light as the sirens rose. Far above, on satellites and vessels not even visible to the naked eye, alien observers watched again. Quiet, awed, trying not to make the same mistake twice. They no longer believed humans were immune to fire. Now they understood something harder. Humans knew the fire would hurt. They just went in anyway.